Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. It's meeting number 26. It's Tuesday, October the 6th, 2009, and the orders of the day are pursuant to Standing Order 1082, a study of plans and priorities of the Department of Citizenship and Immigration. We have before us today, as a witness, the Honourable Jason Kenney, Minister of Citizenship, Immigration and Multiculturalism. Good morning, Minister. You have three of your people with you today, and I'm going to ask that when you're making your comments that you introduce them. You may begin. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Chairman, for having me, and dear colleagues, it's great to be back at committee. I'm joined by our new Deputy Minister, Neil Yates, who has joined us from the Department of Indian and Northern Affairs Canada, and he's gotten right into our big and complex files. I'm also joined by our new Deputy Minister of Strategic Programs and Policy, Les Linkletter, and our old DM for Operations. I mean, in the sense of veteran operations, the ADM Claudette Desjens, who we rely on for her expertise for all of the operations around the world in our many offices. When I appeared before the committee in June, Mr. Chairman, I explained how our action plan for faster immigration was paying off. Today, I'm pleased to inform the committee that we continue to make important progress. You may recall in 2008, Canada accepted more than 500,000 newcomers, including permanent residents, temporary foreign workers, and international students. We also granted citizenship to more than 176,000 new Canadians. You may also recall that our backlog in the federal skilled worker category, which had reached about 600,000, or actually more, had dropped to roughly 515,000 by the end of last year. That was a significant drop of 15%. Mr. Chairman, as of the end of August of this year, this backlog has dropped even further to a little more than 432,000, a reduction of more than 30% since a year ago. We're committed to a strong immigration program that balances Canada's economic, humanitarian, and family reunification goals, and we're planning to welcome between 240 and 265,000 new permanent residents this year. While many other countries have cut back immigration levels in a short-term response to the global economic downturn, we actually are maintaining very ambitious levels in response to our country's medium to long-term economic needs and indeed our demographic challenges. Now, I'd like to update you on some of the things we've done, but it's always worth reminding that since coming to office, we've made some important progress. We're cutting in half the right of landing fee, tripling federal investment in settlement and integration services outside Quebec. C'était toujours très bien élevé au Québec. My department has also made progress on foreign credential recognition, and indeed, as you know, the Prime Minister reached an accord with the premiers in that respect. We'll have, I think, exciting announcements to make later this fall in that regard. Now, Mr. Chairman, since becoming minister almost a year ago, I have also become increasingly concerned by the growing backlog in, and indeed the abuse of, our asylum system. Now, some people have suggested that backlog of refugee claims, which now is around 60,000, an inventory of 60,000 claims pending at the IRB, is a result of unfilled government and council appointments at the Immigration and Refugee Board. Now, as my colleagues here know, the GIC appointment process to the IRB has twice been modified since 1997, and every time there's a modification in the appointment process, there are delays in appointments as a natural result. Mais je dois souligner que j'ai personnellement fait 51 de ces nominations et 19 reconductions dans les fonctions à la CISR. Désormais, effectivement, ça indique à l'écrit 14-10%, mais c'est 94% des postes de la Commission dont les titulaires sont nommés par le gouverneur en conseil sont pourvus. But the current situation is far more complex than just the number of decision makers at the IRB. Between 2006 and 2008, there was, Mr. Chairman, a 60% increase in the number of refugee claims filed in Canada. That growing backlog reached 61,000, as I've indicated this summer. This government inherited about one-third of that backlog, about 20,000 cases when we came to office in 2006. About a third, about another 20,000, were the result in delayed appointments as a result of the transition period to the new merit-based appointment system, which I think is working pretty well. But at least one-third of that 60,000 case backlog before the IRB is the result of the growth in claims above and beyond the capacity of the IRB to process them. You see, Mr. Chairman, even at full capacity, full appointments, full budget, the IRB can only finalize about 25,000 asylum decisions a year. Last year, we received 37,000 claims, in excess, above and beyond the IRB's maximum capacity of 12,000 claims. Clearly, at that rate, the backlog will just continue to grow, and so will wait times. Now, the government's decision this past summer to require visas for all citizens of Mexico and the Czech Republic entering Canada was based on hard facts and demonstrated the need for action. Not an easy decision, but it was, in my judgment, necessary in our national interest. For example, almost 1 in 4 of the asylum claims in Canada received last year came from Mexico, yet the IRB determined that only about 11% of those claims were well-founded. That means a growing number of asylum claimants are not in need of Canada's protection based on the numbers we've seen. In fact, the current rejection or acceptance rate of claims at the IRB is in the range of 44%. Yet, as it currently stands, an unsuccessful claimant who is determined to game our system can stay in Canada for several years with a work permit and/or social assistance, which fundamentally undermines the fairness of our immigration system. For a legal immigrant waiting to come from Mexico, for instance, through one of our, say this federal skilled worker program, fundamentally unfair for them to have to wait 4 to 5 years and see someone else simply jump off a plane, make an asylum claim and get a work permit, even though the claim is not well-founded. Depuis que nous avons exigé que les ressortissants du Mexique et de la République tchèque en visite obtiennent au préalable un visa, le nombre de demandeurs d'asile a été pratiquement réduit à néant. Dans les 2 mois et demi qui ont suivi l'imposition du visa, il n'y a eu que 17 demandes d'asile faites par les ressortissants tchèques au point d'entrée, alors qu'il y en avait eu 831 pendant les 2 mois et demi qui avaient précédé l'imposition du visa. De même, pendant cette période, les demandes faites par des ressortissants mexicains au point d'entrée ont diminué considérablement. Il n'y en a eu que 35, alors qu'il y en avait eu 1287 pendant les 2 mois et demi précédant l'imposition du visa. Avant l'imposition de visa, les demandes d'asile présentées par des ressortissants mexicains et des ressortissants tchèques représentaient près de 50% du nombre total des demandes faites au point d'entrée. Depuis que nous exigeons des visas, les demandes des ressortissants de ces 2 pays ne représentent plus que 6% des demandes. Grâce aux visas, nous avons réussi à endiguer les demandes venant du Mexique et de la République tchèque. Néanmoins, je pense que nous sommes tous d'accord pour dire que le visa est une mesure insuffisante et n'est pas la solution idéale. Nous devons réformer le système d'octroi d'asile, d'après moi. Since we began requiring visitors to first obtain a visa for Mexico and the Czech Republic, the number of claims have slowed to a trickle. And I won't review in English what I've just said in French, except that to say that obviously, Mr. Chairman, visa imposition is a last resort. It's not something we prefer to rely upon to protect the integrity of our immigration system, which is precisely why we need to look at reforms to the refugee asylum system. Now, I know the committee has before Bill C-291, which I acknowledge is a bill inspired by very good sentiment, a desire to ensure a full and fair appeal for refugees. And as the committee knows, the government supports in principle the idea of the implementation of a refugee appeal division, mais seulement dans le contexte d'un système plus efficace, parce qu'on ne peut pas ajouter à nouveau un autre niveau d'appel dans le cadre d'un système qui prend des fois des années pour rendre à la frontière, pour renvoyer à la frontière un faux demandeur d'asile. And so, Mr. Chairman, to summarize, I look forward later this fall to bringing to the committee and to the House recommendations on how we can streamline and improve our asylum system so that it is more balanced, a system that would fully respect the rights, the due process, the charter rights, and our international obligations with respect to asylum claimants, but would also ensure that we protect the integrity of our immigration system and that it does not take years to remove false claimants who abuse Canada's generosity. Donc, Monsieur le Président, je suis disponible aux questions de tous les députés ici et mes autres fonctionnaires seront disponibles également. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your presentation. And Mr. Bevilacqua, you have some questions of the Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Minister, welcome once again. Thank you for your comments on your planning and priorities, and I'd also like to congratulate Mr. Yates for your appointment, as well as Mr. Linklater. It's a fun department, I understand. There's lots of work to do, and I'm sure that as public servants, you will excel, as many public servants excel in this country. I want to pick up on the points raised by the Minister in relationship to the issue of the refugee system and its reforms. As you know, Minister, this is an area that I've raised in question period and in discussions with you, and it is one that I believe is of vital importance to the integrity of Canada's immigration system, and would very much like to see this package presented to the House as soon as possible. One of the concerns that I believe we share is that, in fact, it takes far too long for the status of refugees to be determined, and that has to change. By the same token, I also don't want the reform package to be slow getting in, because that's not a very good start if we're trying to speed things up. I'd like for you to elaborate on that particular point, as well as you know, we're dealing with Bill C-291. If you have any advice in relationship to the issue of an appeals division, and whether or not your package may in fact include an appeals division that would alleviate some of the concerns that we share here in committee.
I thank my colleague for those questions, Mr. Chairman. I agree with him. I think there is some degree of urgency to this, as the Prime Minister indicated when he was in Mexico in the summer. You know, when we had to impose these visas, our foreign partners in Mexico and the Czech Republic, and more broadly the European Union, said to us, look, you have created a pull factor, as we call it in immigration policy in Canada, pull factor of an asylum system that is too easily abused. And when people know they can come here and get a work permit to find good jobs and or social benefits, and that it would take years to remove them, if ever, if they're found to have filed false claims, it incentivizes use of the system. And that's why the Prime Minister said, this is a real problem, we have to deal with it, and do so promptly. So I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, I'm working very diligently with my officials and Cabinet colleagues on this, and I hope that we can, as I indicated, come forward with a very robust package. I'm not going to put a timeline on it, but I'm certainly working at light speed in this regard. Mr. Chairman, under the current system, it's taking over 18 months for a claimant to get a hearing at the IRB. 18 months. Now, if that claimant gets a hearing at the IRB and is found to be not a refugee claimant, they, for whatever reason, don't meet the definition of an asylum claimant, they can then seek leave to appeal to the federal court, and that takes several months. If their leave to appeal is not granted, or if it's granted and then denied, their application for judicial review is denied, they would then typically make an application for approve removal risk assessment. If that takes several months to process, if that's then denied, often they will then seek leave to appeal to the federal court on the negative PRA decision. That takes several months. If the court refuses to grant leave to appeal or denies judicial review on the application, Then typically someone will make an application for permanent residency in Canada for humanitarian and compassionate reasons, including an assessment of risk, which is in a certain sense a second refugee claim. It's a second assessment of the risk they would face if returned. That is now taking, how long are we at H&Cs? It's taking 18 months on H&Cs. If they get a negative H&C decision, they can then seek leave to appeal to the federal court, several more months. If that is rejected, it just continues. And so that track alone, those actually 6 decision points, 3 in the system, 3 at the federal court, we're talking about 3.5 to 6 years in range to process those 3 decision points before someone can be removed. And then once they get into the removals queue, we often have very serious problems getting travel documents from various countries from which these people came to Canada. Consequently, very frequently, we end up with false claimants who are able to stay in Canada for 4, 5, or 6 years, by which time they are very frequently in a position where they're able to demonstrate that they're so integrated into Canada that it would be that we make a positive humanitarian and compassionate decision on their application for permanent residency. So this is a broken system, and it needs to be streamlined. And quite frankly, if we add the RAD into that current system now, we're adding another, how much do we estimate time-wise? 4 or 5 months into the process. That doesn't, I mean, there are already ample opportunities for reviews of the case. No one is, in principle, returned to a country where they face risk because of the PRA. They get a risk assessment at the H&C. They get all of these points of access to the federal court. And that's why the UN High Commissioner on Refugees says that we have one of the most robust asylum systems in the world. But to add yet more time into that sort of 4-year on average time span, in my judgment, doesn't do any benefit to the system. That's why we need to streamline the system, make it move faster, get faster first instance decisions, so we give protection to real refugee claimants much more quickly. And I would hope, I cannot give you a commitment because I haven't, not in a position to make a presentation to Parliament, but I would hope that a reform system would include a proper appeal process on the merits of the case.
Thank you.
At the IRB.
30 seconds, so very quickly.
Your role is citizenship and immigration, obviously. A question on citizenship. You've been making quite a few statements in reference to Canada's citizenship. There's also on page 33 of your RPP, what changes to the citizenship program do you envision? And also is from your report on plans and priorities indicates that one sub-activity of multiculturalism, Canada's action plan against racism, is coming to an end on March 10th, on the 31st of March 2010. Are there any plans to renew this program, and is there going to be any funding available?
With respect to citizenship, Mr. Chairman, we have a multi-phase review of the citizenship program to invest more meaning into the whole citizenship process. The first step will be a revised study guide for the citizenship test to include greater knowledge about Canadian history, democratic traditions, etc. And I hope we'll be in a position to release that fairly soon this fall. We are also we're working with the Commission and interested parties like the Citizenship Institute, founded by Mrs. Clarkson, to look at more meaningful ceremonies. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing in terms of the citizenship program. In terms of the action plan against racism, it was created as a sunset program by the previous government. We've implemented it. We had, I think, a $52 million budget over 3 years. And it's coming to the end of its, we'll review the program and assess how effective it's been.
We're going to have to move on, Monsieur Saint-Cyr.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai plusieurs questions pour le ministre. J'en aurais probablement pour 1 heure, mais je doute que le Président va me l'accorder, alors je vais essayer d'aller à l'essentiel. Je voudrais vous parler encore une fois de la question de l'utilisation du français à Montréal, à la Commission d'immigration du statut de réfugié. Vous vous rappelez d'un cas que je vous ai souligné à plusieurs reprises dans les derniers mois. où on refusait à un avocat et à son client le droit d'obtenir la preuve en français, bien que la langue de procédure ait été, au prix d'une longue bataille, changée pour le français. Et vous me disiez à l'époque que la décision était en cours, que vous ne vouliez pas vous ingérer dans un procès, en quelque sorte. Moi, je n'étais pas satisfait de cette réponse-là parce que vous auriez pu, sans vous impliquer dans essayer d'influencer un juge, vous auriez à tout le moins pu influencer votre collègue de la sécurité publique et lui demander à ce que l'Agence des services frontaliers, elle, accepte de procéder en français puisque c'est elle qui est une des deux parties à la Cour. Mais bon, là, le jugement, il est rendu. La décision est prise, le commissaire a fini son travail et, à notre avis et à l'avis de tous ceux qui défendent la langue française au Québec, et le jugement crée un dangereux précédent. Parce que le commissaire Dumoulin, dans son explication pour laquelle il a refusé de traduire la preuve en français, a dit que l'avocat n'avait pas démontré le préjudice subi par son client pour avoir le droit d'avoir la preuve en français. À mon avis, ce n'est pas acceptable. Hein? En anglais, justement, on dit « rights are rights are rights ». Si vous avez le droit de procéder en français, vous y avez le droit, vous n'avez pas à donner de raison, à démontrer de préjudice quelconque.
Continuez.
Bien, juste pour arriver à ma question, parce que là, le jugement c'est rendu clairement, la balle est clairement dans votre camp. Parce que maintenant, il y a une décision politique à prendre. L'avocat en question, Maître Anfield, a déposé une demande d'appel à la Cour fédérale qui porte uniquement sur la question du français. Et devant lui, en Cour fédérale, ce n'est pas la CISR qui va avoir devant lui, c'est les avocats de Justice Canada qui vous représentent, vous, personnellement, M. Kenney, ministre de l'Immigration. Quelles sont les instructions que vous allez donner à vos avocats? Est-ce que vous allez leur donner les instructions de se battre pour maintenir la décision du commissaire Dumoulin ou vous allez leur donner les instructions de concéder la contestation à Maître Anfield?
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de la question. En premier lieu, je tiens à vous assurer que la CISR est déterminée à offrir les services dans les deux langues officielles au Canada. J'ai parlé là-dessus au président de la CISR et il m'a confirmé leur obligation là-dessus. Le 16 mars 2009, une commissaire de la section de l'immigration a rendu sa décision indiquant que la langue utilisée pour les procédures dans cette enquête sera changée pour le français. Le commissaire de la section de l'immigration de la CISR statuait que les documents ayant déjà été déposés ne seraient pas traduits puisque le ministère de la SFC, ça veut dire le ministre de la Sécurité publique, a rempli son obligation en vertu de la règle 25 de la section de l'immigration de soumettre des documents dans la langue des procédures, qui était l'anglais au moment. Ça veut dire que l'avocat et le client ont accepté l'anglais comme la langue des procédures au début des procédures. Ça a été la langue qu'ils ont choisie. Et donc, c'est la raison pour laquelle la commissaire a ordonné que tout le document soumis subséquemment comme élément de preuve doit être fourni en français ou traduit en français, la nouvelle langue des procédures. La CISR est un tribunal quasi judiciaire, évidemment, donc je suis limité à dans quel point je peux faire commentaire, sauf je peux dire, Monsieur le Président, que toutes les règles ont été suivies. Ça veut dire quand le client et son avocat a demandé un changement de langue, après, à partir de ce moment-là, il faut que tous les documents soient déposés en français, mais avant, la langue était anglais, donc les documents sont anglais.
Monsieur le ministre, le problème, c'est qu'à Montréal, quand l'Agence des services frontaliers ouvre des dossiers, quand les gens arrivent au Canada, ils font les demandes, les dossiers sont toujours ouverts en anglais, systématiquement. Et même si un avocat, à la première occasion, demande le changement des langues de procédure, il est déjà trop tard parce que selon la décision du commissaire Dumoulin, c'est au moment où le gouvernement produit les documents que la langue de procédure s'applique. Alors, au moment où le gouvernement prépare sa poursuite, au moment où l'agence prépare sa poursuite, elle la prépare en anglais. Donc, même l'avocat au moment où il est saisi du dossier, le matériel est déjà produit. Et bon, donc à la base, on peut se questionner sur est-ce que c'est pertinent de toujours ouvrir les dossiers en anglais? Est-ce que la langue par défaut à Montréal ne devrait pas être le français plutôt que de l'anglais? Plutôt que l'anglais. Dans ce cas-là, c'était quelqu'un qui parlait ni français ni anglais. Ça aurait très bien pu être fait en français. Et il y a plein de gens à l'agence, des francophones majoritairement, qui me semble qu'ils devraient avoir le droit de travailler en français par défaut, puis que l'anglais devrait être l'exception à Montréal, comme le français est l'exception à Toronto. Ça, c'est une problématique. Mais moi, j'ai une question plus pointue à vous demander, là. Vous allez avoir, comme ministre, à donner des instructions à vos avocats de Justice Canada qui vont vous représenter lors de l'appel en Cour fédérale. Allez-vous leur dire, allez-y, battez-vous pour la décision du commissaire Dumoulin, on veut garder ces restrictions-là sur l'utilisation du français, ou vous allez leur dire, concédez l'appel, Maître Anfield a raison, la décision du commissaire Dumoulin crée un dangereux précédent et c'est inacceptable qu'on doit faire la démonstration d'un préjudice.
Monsieur le Président, je vais me renseigner là-dessus. C'est souvent que les avocats décident à faire les appels pour les raisons de la loi, pour les précédents. C'est pour les raisons complexes. Et donc, je ne suis pas en détail toutes les milliers des dossiers devant les cours qui touchent sur mon ministère. Je ne suis pas avocat. Et donc, c'est impossible pour moi de m'impliquer dans les détails de toutes les actions qui font face à notre ministère. Je peux vous dire que nous parlons des règles de procédure à la CISR, une organisation quasi-judiciaire indépendante du gouvernement. Et l'information que j'ai est que cette organisation suive l'esprit de la loi sur les langues officielles. Quand vous parlez des langues qui sont disponibles, la langue de service pour, par exemple, à Montréal, j'en suis certain que la grande majorité des...
We're going to have to carry this on another round, Monsieur Censure. Ms. Chow.
Well, each year, Mr. Minister, close to 200,000 visitors try to come into Canada and are turned down. The acceptance rate in missions abroad varies a great deal. If you are coming from Europe to visit your families, 84% approval. If you are coming from Chanagar to, let's say, if your mother just passed away, you try to come and attend a funeral, good chance you're going to be turned down. In fact, 43% approval rate, which means that a majority of them are being turned down. The same is from Islamabad, 34% approval rate, and Colombo, 51% approval rate, which means that if you have relative in that area, if you try to bring them here to attend a wedding or birth of a grandson or, God forbid, a funeral or visit a dying father, mother, most likely they're going to get turned down. And the question is why? Why is there such a various, 84% versus 43% approval rate? And would you put in an appeal system just like UK and Australia so that at least it would be very clear as to why people are turned down? Right now they just get a note saying you have not been able to prove sufficient ties, whatever that means. And you just end up applying again. It could be the same officer who turn you down second, third, fourth time.
Well, thank you, Ms. Chow, and I appreciate your concern about this. As you know, it's an issue that vexes all members of Parliament and every Minister of Immigration. The reality, as you know, is that the Immigration Refugee Protection Act creates a framework for visas for temporary residents who are foreign nationals, unless their country gets a special exemption based on objective criteria, and that ministers delegate their authority to grant those visas to officers who are professional, highly trained members of our public service, who make their decisions based on a review of the facts in an objective manner. Now, I don't want to suggest that they are infallible. They make mistakes like we all do. But I believe that in the overwhelming majority of cases they're making fair and objective decisions. And those decisions are based in part on whether the visa officer's determination of the likelihood of the applicant to return to their country of origin, and a number of different indices are used to assess that. I can tell you I visited Chandakar and Islamabad in part because of the concerns that have been registered with me about the apparently high rejection rates, and I wanted to get to the get a better understanding of what's going on in those missions. I was presented with overwhelming evidence of a incredibly high level of fraudulent documents, supporting documents, the involvement of fraudulent and unscrupulous consultants in making applications. In fact, I heard in Chandakar about people getting rejection letters that were fraudulent, counterfeit rejection letters from the consultants with whom they hired to file the applications. So our visa officers in some of these missions are dealing with a very high incidence of, the value of being able to come to Canada has actually a monetary value on the black market in certain regions, which is extremely high. And this incentivizes a lot of fraudulent or problematic claims, and that creates that compels our public servants to be very vigilant in terms of their acceptance rate. I'd like to add ask the ABM of operations to complement that answer. Just quickly.
Yeah, I only have 7 minutes.
Okay, I'll just quickly say that there are mechanisms that exist today in terms of if the refusal of an application is felt to not be warranted. Certainly MPs write a lot in terms of asking us
I
to
know all that.
return.
Why don't I just ask, because I just add up the numbers. In Chandigarh, the work permit is 15% approval, study permit is 29%. So you're looking at 18,617 people being turned down. Don't tell me that they all have fraudulent documents or that they're cheating. Yes, some of them are coached by unscrupulous consultants to lie, and then some of them come over here, like a few, and they end up exploiting the system. And I know that when you were here, you talked about a few months ago that you would bring in a program where you would tighten up the consultants program so they'll get rid of the ghost consultants, etc. Our committee again approved a report with 9 recommendations. Still, we haven't seen progress on it. And you also talked about fixing the living caregivers program last time you were here, and still it hasn't been fixed. The citizenship of descendants of adopted kids in Canada, that is an area that's causing stateless kids of Canadians born outside Canada. All of those areas are really critically important, and this committee have made recommendations for you to look at and to implement. And yet I haven't seen, it's not in your policy and priority area. So in many ways, coming back to Chandigarh and to Asia Pacific area, I was on a radio program and people were saying, is that discrimination? Why is it that we have such a high turn down rate? And what is it in our region that are we being discriminated? And certainly there's a good feeling that because the process and the application and the rejection is so opaque, it's not transparent. They can't tell why they are and how come so-and-so got it and I didn't. As a result, it's causing really bad reputation overseas.
Thank you. Mr. Dijkstra.
Actually, I will give Mr. Chair.
If the committee wants us to go over, we've gone over for the Liberals and the New Democrats, and if we want to keep going over, they're your rules, and I'm just trying to follow them. And
well, Mr. Chair, I will certainly give up a bit of my time for the minister.
Okay, thank you.
No, you go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Dijkstra. I'll just try to take 30 seconds. Overall, there's a 76% acceptance rate for temporary resident visa applications from nationals of countries in the broader Asian region. So the suggestion that this is somehow prejudicial on the basis of geography or ethnicity is I think, manifestly untrue. And it would be absurd for anyone to suggest that of our professional public servants, that they are making these decisions on the basis of such factors. It's a case-by-case decision. I understand people have a hard time understanding sometimes the decision of visa officers, but they don't know what they don't know the case, the particulars in every case. And I can just say that I do intend, as I've committed before, to come forward with improvements to the regulation of third parties, of intermediaries and ghost consultants, as well as to the living caregiver program. But I think we're probably going to have to agree to disagree on the issue of the right to inherit citizenship ad infinitum. This committee, all members of this committee who were in the last Parliament, agreed to the legislative modifications which are now in place.
I'll try to treat everybody the same, Mr. Dijkstra. You have at least 7 minutes.
Quality is something that you have endeared yourself to this committee on, so I appreciate that. Minister, I do want to say one of the things that certainly we appreciate, and I know the folks on the other side may think I'm saying this subjectively, but the fact that over the past year, each time that we've asked you to come to this committee, you've made the effort to make sure that you get here within a very close time frame that the request has been made. So I appreciate that. I know in the 39th Parliament that wasn't always the case. Some of the ministers weren't able to attend as quickly as requested, and you have. So I do want to certainly thank you for being here this morning and for your promptness in coming to committee when asked. One of the I anticipated some of that reaction from the other side of the table. It's too bad, but I guess it's just the way it is. I know that we've talked in great length about refugee reform, asylum seeking reform, and one of the things that you inspired to do over the course of the summer and leading into the fall was obviously meet and speak with as many Canadians as you could in regard to this issue. You also, as did the Prime Minister, indicated on a number of occasions some of the potential changes that we may see in the legislation. I wondered if you'd like to comment on a few of those, or if you had some that you thought committee would be interested in hearing. And also, I know the first question that Mr. Bevilacqua asked me when we returned was a time frame, and I don't know whether or not you were able to provide us with a time frame on when this legislation may be coming forward.
Thank you. Not specifically, Mr. Chairman, because as you know, this would involve legislative changes, which requires cabinet approval, and I can't presume to make a decision for all of my cabinet colleagues. Let me just say that it's a matter we continue to work on. It's a huge, complex, interministerial package of policy that involves not only simple statutory changes, it also involves massive operational changes in a range of ministries, and it is not a simple, clean little piece of policy that can be brought forward. It's something that I know previous governments and previous ministers have been considering for years. I am certainly committed to acting. The Prime Minister has made that commitment public as well in Mexico, and I will be coming forward with recommended changes. That is my intention. In terms of the parameters, look, the first objective is to ensure that we have a system that has fundamental procedural fairness, that meets our international legal obligations, and, of course, our obligations under the Charter of Rights. But to do so in a way that renders decisions more quickly, that provides protection to real victims of persecution much more quickly than is currently the case, and which disincentivizes false claims by moving more quickly, so that that false claimants get a fair shot, they get a hearing, they get fair process. But if they are deemed to be bogus refugee claimants, they are removed much more quickly than is currently the case. I described earlier in my answer to Mr. Bevilacqua how the current process can lead to a pathway of several years in Canada for someone who is a false claimant. That is unacceptable. It's an advertisement for people to come and abuse the system. I should note that while we have the IRB rejects a majority of applications, 56%, I think 58% in the past year, the IRB has an acceptance rate of claims which is about twice as high as the average amongst comparable democracies like France and Britain, which suggests that we have an extremely generous system. And that the concern is that people abroad who want to migrate to Canada for economic reasons see this as an invitation to come in through the back door of the asylum system. And we need to close that back door. We want to keep the front door open for all legitimate asylum claimants, but say to those who try to sneak in through the back door as false claimants, get in the immigration queue. You can come to Canada legally if you qualify for one of our immigration programs, and that's the objective.
Thank you. I'm going to steer a bit away from this. I know Ms. Wong has a couple of questions on this topic as well, but the member from Parkdale High Park has introduced a private member's bill regarding military deserters, and obviously one of the significant concerns out of this is the whole aspect of the legal obligations that any of these military deserters may face in the countries of origin of which they come from. Whatever those potential criminal charges that they may face would, certainly according to the bill that he's presenting, present an extreme difficulty for us in terms of allowing them into the country. I know that there is two sides of every story, and one of the responsibilities that you have as minister is to provide a perspective on what the potential impact of this private member's bill might be, and I wondered if you could do that now.
Mr. Chairman, currently, individuals, you know, I read a letter or an op-ed by our colleague Mr. Kennedy this morning saying that he's calling for the right of, quotes, U.S. and other military deserters to, or war resistors to make asylum claims in Canada. They have that right, and many of these individuals have made such claims. My understanding is that in 100% of instances where U.S. military deserters have made recent asylum claims before the IRB, those claims have been rejected as being unfounded or not meeting the definition of the status of refugees provided by the UN Convention and by Canadian law. So I've been criticized for commenting on that fact as supposedly interfering in the decisions of the IRB. To the contrary, I'm commenting on the decisions the IRB has already made. The decisions they've made, to the best of my knowledge, in 100% of the cases before it from this category of individuals have been negative decisions, leading me to conclude that the IRB has decided that these are unfounded false refugee claims. That means that these are individuals who have come to Canada illegally. And I believe that we should apply the law fairly and consistently, not with political prejudice. We should not say, well, this particular group of people we favor politically for whatever reason, and therefore we will exempt them from the normal application, the normal and consistent application of immigration laws. Now, what concerns me about Mr. Kennedy's Bill C-440, in particular, is that it would seek to, it says the minister, that a foreign national in Canada shall be deemed to be in a situation in which humanitarian compassionate consideration justify the granting. He wants to amend Section 25 of IRPA to say that individuals who make these kinds of claims shall be exempted by the minister from any legal obligation applicable to that foreign national that would prevent them from being allowed to remain in Canada. Now, I read that as suggesting that the obligations, the requirements under IRPA with respect to inadmissibility would not be applied to such individuals. This would be, I think, totally without precedent. It would say one particular category of foreign nationals could avoid the inadmissibility provisions of IRPA, and that includes inadmissibility for reasons of criminality. I'm concerned that this would be an advertisement to people to come and make claims on the grounds of military service, and they would therefore be exempt from the inadmissibility provisions of IRPA, including with respect to criminality. I think that's a very dangerous thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Ms. Mendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bonjour, Monsieur le Ministre. Monsieur Yates, c'est un plaisir. Je vous rencontre pour la première fois. J'aimerais faire, et Madame Deschênes, que nous revoyons, Monsieur Linklater. J'aimerais revenir sur vos remarques d'ouverture aujourd'hui, où vous dites à la fin « Je ne peux appuyer l'ajout d'un nouveau mécanisme d'appel que s'il s'inscrit dans le cadre d'un nouveau système d'examen des demandes d'asile réformé et rationalisé ». La question étant, quand est-ce que nous allons pouvoir, même si M. Dijkstra a déjà posé un peu la question, quand est-ce qu'on peut espérer de voir une proposition de réforme de ce système? Nous en avons besoin rapidement, très rapidement, vous l'avez dit, il y a un backlog assez important. Quand est-ce qu'on peut espérer de voir cette réforme?
Merci. Madame le député, nous travaillons sérieusement sur tout un paquet de réformes là-dessus et je ne peux pas vous donner une date, mais je peux vous dire que le ministère et moi-même, nous travaillons de façon diligente sur les réformes sur le système d'asile et j'espère qu'on peut avoir les détails prochainement, mais je ne peux pas vous donner une date parce que il y a tout un processus auprès du cabinet, évidemment, pour les modifications comme ça.
Thank you, Minister. I'm just going to refer to a quote on the Ottawa Sun on October 2nd, where you say that all those things that have been put on hold, indefinite hold because of the constant election threats, I don't see how putting on hold pieces of legislation is going to help us move forward. We need to get legislation through. We need to amend the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. We all agree that the process needs to be streamlined. I would totally agree with that. There's no hesitation on our part. But we also agree, or at least on this side, that there's a great deal of unfairness right now. The fact that there's only one commissioner judging a case is causing enormous harm to the fairness of the process. So, okay, election threats have been put aside for the moment, it seems. Can we hope to see something this fall?
Yes, I hope so. I certainly hope so, Madam Deputy. I guess my point in that, when I made those remarks, is simply that it is difficult for any minister to plan for mid to long-term projects when one doesn't know, whether. I mean, 2 weeks ago we were facing, I think everyone agreed, a very high likelihood of immediate dissolution, and I continue to encourage my officials to work on all of these projects diligently. But from a planning point of view, I think we all recognize that it can be somewhat destabilizing to have constant threats of dissolution. That's not a partisan comment; it's just a reality of the minority parliaments in which we live. But we are working diligently on this. Let me just make a comment on the issue of fairness. I agree in principle that it would be preferable to have an appeal division within the IRB, within the context of a streamlined system. But I think there is fundamental fairness in the current system. Certainly, the United Nations High Commissioner on Refugees has repeatedly commented on the fairness of Canada's system. Arguably, we have a system that is more fair than perhaps the asylum system in any other country that I'm aware of. And let's not forget that the decision at the IRB, the initial decision, is not the end of the road. There is access to appeal to the federal court on that decision. There's the pre-removal risk assessment. There's the humanitarian and compassionate application on risk, each of which also are open for people to seek leave to appeal to the federal court. So there are multiple safeguards in the current system, which is why it takes so long.
Mais si vous permettez, Monsieur le ministre, c'est là qu'il y a le manque de justice, si on veut, ou d'équité. Parce que de faire attendre aussi longtemps pour que les personnes aient une réponse, c'est ça le problème, là. Ce sont des familles qui vivent des mois, des années, sans savoir à quoi s'attendre. Une famille qui arrive après 5 ans là, et que toutes les étapes ont été passées et qu'on finit par leur dire « Désolé, mais vous devez retourner dans votre pays ». Pendant ces 5 années, ils ont eu le temps de travailler ici, ils ont eu le temps de s'installer, ils ont eu de créer une vie ici. Souvent, ils ont eu le temps d'avoir des enfants qui sont canadiens. Quelle est la justice de les renvoyer, ces familles-là, après 5 ou 6 ans ici? C'est là le gros problème.
C'est la raison pour laquelle souvent, dans ces cas comme ça, les gens reçoivent une décision positive sur leur demande pour résidence permanente pour les raisons humanitaires, pour les motifs humanitaires. C'est pas juste d'avoir un système qui prend tellement du temps. C'est pas raisonnable et c'est la raison pour laquelle il faut accélérer le système et je vais proposer les réformes là-dessus. Je vous engage.
Madame Taylak, Monsieur Censure? No.
Oops.
What an entry.
Bonjour, Monsieur le ministre. Bonjour, messieurs les conseillers et Madame la conseillère. Je vais commencer d'emblée par vous poser une question que je vous ai adressée en Chambre au début de la rentrée parlementaire. Vous avez écouté l'émission Enquête qui faisait la lumière justement sur un stratagème qu'utilisaient des consultants québécois afin justement de permettre à des milliers de personnes de détourner des règles pour l'obtention de la citoyenneté. Maintenant que votre ministère est au courant, puis que vous-même, Monsieur le ministre, vous avez avoué être au courant de ces pratiques-là, je voudrais savoir si ces pratiques-là sont répandues ailleurs qu'au Québec. Et l'autre chose, je veux savoir quelles seront les mesures qui vont être apportées afin de punir ou de corriger justement là, ces lacunes-là. Et ne croyez-vous pas non plus que si Québec était maître d'œuvre justement dans le domaine d'immigration, on pourrait encadrer la profession de consultant davantage justement pour éviter que des gens justement sans scrupules puissent justement là, permettre là, à des gens qui paient justement ces services-là là, de recevoir là, des conseils qui sont erronés et qui peuvent justement là, les mettre dans des situations de très grande illégalité.
Merci de ces questions, Monsieur le Président. Je suis totalement d'accord avec le problème des faux consultants, les intermédiaires sans scrupules qui exploitent les demandeurs de statut de citoyen ou d'immigration au Canada. C'est la raison pour laquelle j'ai engagé à faire une réforme, une augmentation de réglementation dans ce secteur-là. Écoutez, ce n'est pas seulement un problème au Canada, c'est un problème outre-mer également. La majorité de fraudes, d'exploitation des immigrants potentiels au Canada par les intermédiaires se déroule outre-mer. C'est la raison pour laquelle j'ai soulevé le besoin de nos partenaires à l'échelle internationale, comme l'Inde, comme la Chine, de faire beaucoup plus davantage pour réglementer les consultants en immigration. Et moi, je veux mettre la pression sur ces gouvernements étrangers là-dessus. Ici, au niveau domestique, j'ai parlé à la ministre Yolande James là-dessus. Je crois qu'elle se préoccupe de problèmes au Québec. Elle considère les options au fédéral. On va dévoiler certaines idées qui sont basées en partie des recommandations de ce comité là-dessus. En ce qui concerne la fraude à la citoyenneté de résidence permanente, on a vu un reportage à Radio-Canada il y a 2 semaines. J'ai souligné que le problème ne relève pas exclusivement aux consultants ou ressortissants du Liban. Ce n'est pas juste indiquer que ça relève à un seul pays d'origine. Effectivement, c'est un problème que nous voyons partout, de tous les pays d'origine. Et ce n'est pas exclusivement au Québec, évidemment pas. C'est un problème qui existe partout et qui nous préoccupe énormément.
J'aurais beaucoup de questions à vous poser par rapport à ce sujet-là, mais j'ai seulement 5 minutes que je vais aller sur un autre sujet. Vous avez parlé là que présentement les ressortissants mexicains au point d'entrée, depuis 2 mois et demi, il y avait 35 demandes d'asile, alors qu'il y en avait eu 1287 pour une période de 2 mois et demi précédents. Mais vous avez omis de nous transmettre une donnée qui est essentielle, le nombre total d'entrées. Ça, je pense que c'est une donnée qui est importante. Si on a eu 35 demandes, mais qu'il y a eu 350 entrées par rapport à 12 087, alors qu'il y en aurait eu plus de 10 000, on est toujours autour de 10 là. J'aimerais connaître, justement, quand vous parlez qu'il y a eu 35 demandeurs, combien qu'il y a eu d'entrées au total. Et l'autre chose, vous avez parlé de 11 des gens qui demandaient des statuts étaient de véritables demandeurs. Présentement, vous parlez, là, quand vous parlez là, de 17 demandes au point d'entrée, alors qu'il y en avait eu 831 à la base. Là, on parle là, de seulement 2 de gens qui ont pu, justement, demander par rapport à ce qu'il y avait eu là, antérieurement. Mais effectivement, cette donnée-là est traduite par le fait que plusieurs des personnes n'ont même pas pu atteindre le point d'entrée. Qu'il y a peut-être également, là, par cette mesure-là, de vrais réfugiés qui ne pourront pas demander le statut ici puisqu'ils n'ont plus la capacité de pouvoir justement se rendre à nos points d'entrée.
Just want to draw to all the members' attention that everybody's exceeding their time, so that's fine if you want to do that. But Mr. Minister.
Le Président, merci des questions. Je peux vous informer que depuis l'imposition du visa sur les nationaux, les citoyens mexicains, notre mission à la Ville de Mexique a donné un taux d'approbation de 90% pour les demandeurs des visas au Canada en tant que résidents temporaires. Ça veut dire seulement 10% des demandeurs ont été rejetés, 90% ont été acceptés. Et depuis l'imposition du visa jusqu'au 25 septembre, notre mission au Mexique a émis 29 527 visas aux visiteurs mexicains. Ça veut dire plusieurs milliers par semaine. Ça veut dire qu'il y a très peu de ces gens-là, une trentaine de ces gens-là ont fait les demandes d'asile au point d'entrée. Et ça veut dire c'est une indication que nos fonctionnaires en Mexique ont fait les bonnes décisions parce que la grande majorité des voyageurs peuvent continuer à venir au Canada, mais ils ont vu les gens qui auparavant avaient l'intention de faire les demandes d'asile. Ils ont fait, je crois, ils ont trouvé un équilibre entre le voyage au Canada et les demandeurs d'asile.
We seem to have lost control of the time. You know, if you want to ask these questions, you're going to have to brief her. Ms. Wong, please.
Yeah, I'll make it very brief. And then again on, thank you, Mr. Minister, and thank you to new staff, Deputy Minister Eats and the Acting Assistant Deputy, Ms. later. So thank you for coming. My question, I had two questions. I'll make the first question really short. The first question is that, you know, we kept hearing that the refugee claim has taken a long time and people are staying longer and then their family have settled in. Now, don't forget that if it's 10 to 12 years, for the initial application, it's the government 10 to 12 years ago which made the decision, and so I think we need to change that, number one. Number two, I think that since because there's no system right now, which we have already got enough appeal systems, so that's why it resulted in having these people and their families stay 10 to 12 years. And these people naturally have families which settled in. So I just want the Minister to shed more light on that. Having one more layer of appeal would only even worsen the situation. Can you further comment on that?
Yes, again, I emphasize that there are many levels of appeal. I also want to emphasize that it was in 2002 that IRPA was brought into effect by the previous Liberal government. It included within the statute a refugee appeal division, but it was my Liberal predecessors who felt that it would be disastrous to the refugee asylum system if they were to actually implement the appeal division, because it would add even more processing time into what is already taking too long. And fundamentally, as I've mentioned, we do have a very fair system with multiple levels of de facto appeal, access to the federal court, and full compliance with our charter and international obligations. The addition of an appeal division in that context would not qualitatively improve the fairness of the system, although it's preferable to have an appeal on the merits, in my judgment, within the context of a streamlined system. But look, if we just now pass that bill today and we add another 5 months onto the process, what does that mean? Longer processing times, more incentive to come and abuse the system, and that will attract more claimants, and it just continues to allow the system to spiral out of control when we need to get it under control.
Yeah, my second question is about foreign credential recognition. It is the single biggest issue which I came across when I talked to the communities. There are professionals who really needed that. I know that our government has already done a lot in strengthening that, in working with other levels of government. However, can you shed lights again on what additional things the government is planning to do for foreign credential recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a hugely important issue. As all members know, the federal role in this is quite limited because the regulation of professions is provincial responsibility under the Constitutional Division of Powers. We know that each province has created or oversees some 40 licensing bodies in their own jurisdictions. That's over 400 across the country. But having said that, our government has taken meaningful federal leadership to try to provide much better information to newcomers before they even arrive in Canada on pathways to credential recognition. We've done so through our $32 million investment in the Foreign Credential Referral Office, the creation of the Canadian Immigration Integration Project pilot offices abroad, which we will be expanding this year, which in part provide advice to newcomers prior to their landing, to federal skilled workers on how to apply for and obtain credential recognition in their respective professional governing bodies and in the provinces to which they intend to move, to settle. But we've also continued with the Foreign Credential Recognition Program in the Ministry of Human Resources and Social Development, which works with professional agencies on streamlining their processes and highlighting best practices and supporting the work of NGOs in mentorship programs and apprenticeship programs. For instance, giving foreign trained medical doctors who have not gotten their credentials recognized an opportunity to at least get trained up as paramedics so they can work in the medical field. Finally, the Prime Minister committed in the last election and the speech from the throne to establish an agreement with the provinces on a national framework for credential recognition, which we were delighted occurred in January at the First Ministers' meeting. And I believe my colleague, Minister Finley, and I will be making some positive announcements in the near future about the progress we're making on the creation of a national framework for credential recognition so that there's much greater coordination between the 10 provinces.
Thank you, Ms. Wong. Mr. Calandra.
Thank you, Minister. I just wondered if I could, earlier you talked about the visa requirements with respect to the Czech and Mexican nationals, but I want to just take it from a bit of a different angle with respect to what are some of the factors that you consider or the department considers when you are reviewing whether a visa should be imposed or removed from a particular country.
Thank you. Just let me clarify that under IRPA, all foreign nationals require visas to come to Canada. That's the default statutory provision. There are special exemptions granted to a certain number of countries, and I think of the roughly 200 sovereign states in the world, we require visas of the nationals of, I think it's 142 countries, 143 countries. So roughly 3/4 of the countries in the world we require their nationals to obtain temporary resident visas to visit us in Canada. The criteria for visa exemption include a number of objective criteria, one of which is the visa rejection rate. Okay, I'm just trying to figure out whether or not this is confidential, but the benchmark, the standard benchmark, for instance, is a visa rejection rate of less than 4% for at least 3 years. Another thing we look at is the evidence of the tendency for nationals of a particular country to overstay or to make asylum claims. Another factor is the security of passports, travel documents of a foreign country, and issues such as criminality. If there's a really high level of say organized crime, that would be a concern. So I think there are over 20 criteria, but those are some of the principal ones that we consider. And when we do a visa exemption, we send a team in to do a risk assessment. They review all of those criteria and they make a report. But when we see a particular country, like, let me be clear about the Mexican situation. We're receiving more asylum claims from that particular country than any other country for which we have data in the history of our post-war history, in the history of our immigration. Since we've begun to accept asylum claimants, we received more from Mexico than anywhere else. So that begged the question: if we were not to impose a visa on Mexico, given those facts, then why should we have a visa on any other country? I mean, it really got to the point where, and I remind the committee, for instance, the previous government, this is not a criticism, it's just it's a fact, previous government gave the then Czechoslovakia visa exemption in the mid-1990s. 2 years later, reimposed on the then Czech Republic after we had received 1,000 asylum claimants. 1,000. This government granted the Czech Republic a visa exemption in fall of 2007 and reimposed this summer after we had received 3,000 asylum claimants. So in that sense, we were far more patient trying to work with our foreign partners to deal with these issues than had been the case in the past. And if anything, we should be criticized for having been so patient, in my judgment.
Thank you. I just wanted to also touch on quickly on the response. I was speaking to some friends of mine from the Philippine community, and they're obviously very concerned with what has happened back home. A lot of concern in that community. I wonder if you might just briefly touch on some of the actions your department made following.
Well, I know we all share our concern and our sympathies for those affected by the Typhoon Katsana in Philippines. As you know, first of all, our mission was our busiest mission in the world now in terms of total processing is the Canadian Immigration Mission at our embassy in Manila, and unfortunately that mission was shut down for a couple of days because of the flooding, I understand. 3 days. And so the locally engaged staff couldn't make it in many cases, so our operations were hindered. I think we're now getting back up to full capacity to process in the Manila mission. I announced last week that we will prioritize processing for those individuals who have been directly and significantly affected by the weather event in the Philippines, for family reunification applications and applicants for temporary resident visas. Do you want to comment on that any further, Claudette?
I think as long as any case can either call the call center, can contact the CPC in Vegreville or the mission, and if they can demonstrate that they've been affected seriously by the typhoon, we will do all that's possible to expedite processing.
Thank you. Mr. Wisniewski.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question, hopefully as quick and succinct answer, Minister. How many citizenship judges positions are there in British Columbia, and how many are currently vacant?
I want to give you an answer, but do we have the numbers? I'll have to get back to you. I think from memory, Mr. Chairman, there are about 6 positions in BC, and I believe we have 4 or 5 of those filled. I think there's 1, maybe 2 part-time positions still there vacant.
Okay. Minister, I'd be surprised if you didn't know the numbers. In fact, it's quite correct. There are 5 full-time, 1 part-time position. And my understanding is 4 of those were vacant for the longest period of time. And in fact, some of those may have been filled recently. Now, that is a decision made by your office. In this particular case, you've referred to other parts of citizenship and immigration, the system being broken, a broken system. Those were the words you used. You said, you know, there are legislative knots. You blamed minority government. In this particular case, it's pretty, it's a simple decision made by your office, and there were judges in place who expressed a willingness to your office to continue in their positions until such time that those positions were filled with someone that you appointed, yet notwithstanding that, in British Columbia, you had a situation where thousands upon thousands of Canadians in waiting, instead of celebrating their new citizenship, all they were waiting was for the ceremony. Who is responsible for the fact that 4 of those positions were vacant? In fact, in one particular case, vacant for over a year.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I've moved quickly on appointments in general. I should point out it's not exclusively my power. Of course, I can recommend to Cabinet, but there is a process that we've adopted as well for pre-screening of applicants for appointment to the Citizenship Commission, and that takes time. When I came into this ministry, my recollection is we had a shortage of qualified pre-screen candidates ready for appointment in British Columbia. I have no reason to maintain vacancies if we have qualified candidates to appoint. I talked about this issue with the Chief Judge Springate of the Commission when I became minister, and he assured me that the Commission had contingency operations in place, including bringing itinerant judges in from other parts of the country to do services. I regret that Judge Guilbeault had to carry so much burden for so long in BC because we didn't have an inventory of pre-screened candidates, but we've moved quickly now to fill up the appointments, I think with the exception of one part-time position.
So, Minister, you've mentioned a number of judges by name. So it seems quite clear that you were familiar with the situation, yet you're saying that there's a process. Well, there was an opportunity also to continue with existing judges. You knew, if you're intimately aware with the responsibilities of your office, that one of those is to appoint judges so that thousands of these Canadians in waiting do not get frustrated. This is a huge life decision. They've made it. They passed all the requirements. All they were waiting was for the ceremony, yet your office had not made that decision. Now, I see you're trying to push the responsibility onto process. Once again, this isn't a complicated process, and judges have stated that they were willing to continue, even on a monthly basis, in their positions to make sure that we wouldn't end up with a backlog of tens of thousands of people. Same situation actually happened in my part of the country, in Etobicoke, where for 7 months there wasn't a judge available. And the judge, once again, was willing to continue in her capacity. Thousands of Canadians were denied, Canadians in waiting, denied a ceremony to confirm their citizenship. In this particular case, I don't think you can shift responsibility. Who was responsible?
Well, I don't recall, Mr. Chairman, any particular being aware of any requests to extend terms. Typically, I stand to be corrected, but I think when a citizenship judge seeks an extension of terms, that would be a dialogue they have with the chief judge, in this case, Judge Springate, who's responsible for the administration of the commission and the assignments of all of the judges. Sometimes Mr. Springate will recommend to me that I thank someone for their service and that they no longer continue. Sometimes he'll recommend an extension of their appointment or reappointment as citizenship judge. And generally speaking, I accept the advice that I'm given. So I can't comment on particular cases. I'll be happy to look into them. But I was assured by the Commission that they were able to continue with the important work they do in terms of the ceremonies in British Columbia during the period where there was a shortage of judges.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Ms. Greywall.
Minister, can you please comment on the progress that we are making in decreasing the immigration backlog?
Well, thank you. As I mentioned in my opening statement, Mr. Chairman, we have had considerable success with respect to the action plan for faster immigration in the federal skilled worker category, more commonly known as the point system. Since we made the action plan operational last November, about 10 months ago, we've seen the backlog in the federal skilled worker category go from 635,000 claims to, rather cases, to under 435,000 cases. That's a reduction of about 32%. So it's, I mean, that's actually a phenomenal achievement, and I'd like to give praise where it belongs to our departmental officials who have worked very hard over the past year to manage this new program, while also dealing with the applications that were received prior to February of 2008, which don't fall within the action plan. They've also been continuing to process a large number of those files. So we've seen a 1/3 reduction in the federal skilled worker category. While we have seen improvements in processing times for family class sponsorship applications, they've gone down. For instance, processing times have gone down considerably in the last 3 years in that regard. We have not seen a reduction, I believe, in the inventory in that category. And as you know, in the refugee asylum category, we've seen a substantial increase, and we're now dealing with 60,000 asylum claims. So it depends on the category, but overall, the mainstream economic stream of immigration to Canada, the Federal Skilled Worker Program, has seen a massive improvement, and we expect to continue to see that.
The rest of my time.
One other that is that for people who applied under that program since February of last year, they are getting decisions on their application for permanent residency in less than a year, which is a radical improvement over the 4 to 5 years it was taking prior to the action plan.
Thank you, Minister. The rest of my time, Mr. Chair, I would like to give it to Mr. Young.
Time today.
Yeah, that's fine. Mr. Young.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I have a couple of questions that come right directly from my constituency office in my riding of Oakville. The first is a concern expressed to me by a constituent who is a Christian from Pakistan and is concerned about the treatment on applications for visa and immigration to Canada for Christians. And I just wondered, what have you done to ensure that applications from Christians in Pakistan are treated fairly?
Well, actually, it's an interesting question, Mr. Chairman. Those concerns have been raised directly with me in my meetings with the Pakistani Christian community in Canada, as well as with the Ahmadiyya community and Canadians, Sikh Canadians who have relatives in Pakistan, and all of these constitute religious minority communities in Pakistan. It's one of the reasons I went to Islamabad with the first mission I visited abroad upon becoming minister, and I raised with the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and Minorities Affairs Ministers in Pakistan our concern about the treatment of religious and ethnic minorities. I also reinforced with our immigration officials in Islamabad the importance of ensuring absolutely fair treatment for these communities. There is a concern, for instance, Mr. Chairman, that the Pakistani government documents and passports indicate someone's confession, and that can be a flag of concern. People want to make sure they're getting fairly treated. So I've done everything I think we reasonably can. I have, to underscore the importance of this issue, as a government, we have worked with, talked to those communities. We, for instance, have made a significant contribution of over $33 million to relief of the Swat Valley refugees, and many of those include Christians from Swat Valley who were facing violence from the Pakistani Taliban. I know that our parliamentary colleagues, John Weston and Tim Opal, both visited both Islamabad and Swat Valley, in the case of Mr. Opal, to raise their concerns about the treatment of those religious minorities.
Thank you. Thank you. Some more time? Thank you, Chair. The other one is an administrative matter. Minister, in the GTA, there's currently only one office where people can go to collect their permanent residency cards, and Oakville is like at least an hour's drive from 25 St. Clair Avenue West, and then they get up, and some of the lineups are pretty long, and they end up getting parking tickets, and it takes, better part of half a day to go there. It's a little bit unfair administrative. I just wondered, is there anything proposed to address the need for an additional processing center in the GTA?
The operational details I usually leave to the experts.
We're aware of some of those issues, and we're trying to see what we can do. Really, in terms of, we're not looking at opening another center for them, but we are looking in terms of our modernization to use maybe other government centers that could assist. What we want to also look at is the need for people to come and pick up their permanent resident card, and if there is a way that we could possibly do it differently so that applicants wouldn't be inconvenienced by having to pick them up. Over the summer, we put more staff in so that people wouldn't have to wait as long also.
So you're not paying parking tickets yet?
Pardon me?
You're not paying for parking tickets yet?
The Financial Administration Act is making it a little difficult.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mr. Bevilacqua.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to take this opportunity, Mr. Young, to welcome you to our committee and to your first question. Minister, we spent a lot of time in this committee looking at process, whether we're talking about the refugee system, migration system, whether you're talking about visas, the time it takes. But one of the things that I think this committee and government in general is not dealing with, which I think is a real big issue, is the status of recent immigrants to Canada. They are overrepresented in the unemployment rates of the country. They are overrepresented in the poverty rates of the country. They are overrepresented in the underemployment, which I think to me is a very, very important issue to dedicate time for this committee as well as government. Now, this is going to require a pan-government approach. It can't simply, this responsibility simply can't be yours. This is an issue that is going to involve human resources, going to involve finance, Department of Finance and the Minister, and indeed Cabinet. But it is a very important issue. If we are going to welcome people to this country, we need to make sure that the dream that we sell as a country abroad needs to be realized when they get here. And so, for example, recent immigrants are 3 times more likely to lose their jobs during an economic downturn. From June 2008 to 2009, the unemployment rate dropped, I believe, 1.9%. But it was 5.7% for immigrants. When you look at the amount of money that immigrants spend in housing versus the general population, these are big issues because they speak to the fact that we are not maximizing the human resources potential of the individuals that come to this country. And that can't be good news for the immigrants, and it's also not good news for our country. And I wonder whether a comprehensive strategy and a very holistic approach can be initiated by your government to address these key concerns that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I entirely agree with Mr. Bevilacqua's remarks, and I appreciated his framing this in a nonpartisan sense because it is not a partisan issue. In fact, the data indicates that for at least 2 decades we have seen under successive governments in different parties, and we have seen a decline in the standard of living, the rate of employment, the economic success of newcomers. This is an issue that really preoccupies me. Our government has tried to take some steps to assist in faster economic integration of newcomers, including our tripling of settlement funding in the provinces outside of Quebec to reach the Quebec level. So we have much more robust language training available, job mentorship programs, integration programming in general. I've just made give you one example, an announcement in Toronto last 3 weeks ago about the HIPPY program, which provides in-house integration services to stay-at-home moms and dads of preschool children. So we're doing a lot more, like 3 to 4 times more in terms of those programs than was the case a few years ago. But you're quite right. That in and of itself will not turn the situation around. Obviously, foreign credential recognition is a big part of the problem. And we hope that we finally are on the cusp of serious cooperation between the provinces and their respective professional agencies to get faster, streamlined pathways to credential recognition. I believe we're getting there. I think the governments of Ontario and British Columbia have been taking some meaningful measures in that respect, as has Manitoba. I think overall, though, Mr. Chairman, what we need to focus on is, in our immigration program, are newcomers that fit into the labour market opportunities that exist in Canada. You know, Premier Campbell of British Columbia once said to me, we don't need more unrecognized engineers driving taxi cabs in British Columbia. We have lots of jobs that are going unfilled. We need newcomers that can come and fill those jobs. And I think that's what we've been trying to do with the Action Plan for Faster Immigration and prioritizing occupational categories that are in national demand. I personally believe that's also what we've been doing by working with various provinces and expanding the provincial nominee programs, where people have a job offer when they get to Canada, so there's no transition or underemployment or survival job time. A welder from Poland that arrives in Manitoba with a welding job is working that job theoretically the next week, paying taxes and being fulfilled. So, you know, I think there have been some incremental improvements in terms of immigration policy to more closely align our intake with our labour market needs. But I agree with you, Mr. Bevilacqua, a lot more needs to be done, and I'd be very open to suggestions in that regard.
Thank you. Monsieur Saint-Cyr.
Merci. Je vais vous parler des visas pour les Mexicains. Selon vos propres chiffres, dans les 2 mois et demi qui ont précédé l'imposition des visas, il y avait 1287 personnes qui faisaient la demande de statut de réfugié. Or, d'un point de vue historique, il y a 11 des demandeurs qui sont des véritables réfugiés. Si on fait une simple multiplication, on arrive donc à, grosso modo, pendant cette période-là, 141 personnes qui sont des véritables réfugiés, statistiquement sur une période de 2 mois et demi. Et vous êtes fiers de nous dire qu'il y en a seulement 35 qui ont fait la demande. Et même en supposant que ces 35-là sont tous des véritables demandeurs de réfugiés, il en manque 106, Monsieur le ministre. Il y a 106 personnes qui, selon vos propres chiffres, en provenance du Mexique, sont des véritables demandeurs de réfugiés et qui n'ont pas pu demander parce qu'ils n'ont pas pu simplement se rendre au Canada. Qu'est-ce qui arrive avec ces 106 personnes-là qui sont des vrais réfugiés?
Monsieur le Président, ça paraît que M. Saint-Cyr suggère que le Canada peut-être a une obligation d'accueillir n'importe qui de n'importe quel pays qui veut faire une demande d'asile.
Non, ce sont des vrais réfugiés. Selon les décisions de la CISR, ils ont déterminé que c'était des véritables réfugiés.
Il y a plus de 10 millions de vrais réfugiés, selon l'ONU, dans les camps de réfugiés partout au monde. Nous acceptons au Canada le plus grand nombre de façon relative de n'importe quel pays développé. Nous acceptons cette année 10 000 réfugiés pour réétablissement au Canada et davantage, une autre, 25 000 qui ont été acceptés par la CISR. Globalement, c'est quoi le chiffre pour les personnes protégées?
About 30,000.
C'est 30 000 personnes protégées par année. C'est le plus grand chiffre de façon relative au monde. Si vous suggérez qu'il faut accepter les vrais réfugiés, les potentiels demandeurs d'asile de la Mexique, pourquoi pas de la Chine, pourquoi pas du Cuba, pourquoi pas de tous les pays du monde? Nous avons une obligation de visa sur 142 pays du monde. S'il faut éliminer le visa pour le Mexique, pour que ces gens-là puissent faire les demandes, pourquoi pas les autres 141 pays du monde? Est-ce que vous suggérez que c'est une obligation des contribuables du Canada d'accepter franchement les millions, peut-être les dizaines de millions de demandeurs d'asile potentiels au monde? C'est ridicule. Il faut avoir un système humanitaire de rétablissement pour les victimes de persécution dans le cadre d'un système d'immigration géré avec les balises. Et ça, ce que nous faisons, nous acceptons les gens comme les vrais réfugiés. Selon l'ONU, nous avons un système d'asile très généreux et il faut le continuer. Mais, Monsieur le Président, je n'accepte pas le propos qu'il faut éliminer les visas pour tous les pays où vivent les demandeurs d'asile qui peuvent faire les demandes.
I think Monsieur Saint-Cyr is trying to jump in here.
Ouais. Monsieur le ministre, c'est vous qui, pendant tout l'été, avait fait une campagne puis avait justifié cette décision-là sur la base qu'il y a des faux demandeurs qui proviennent de ces pays-là. C'est l'argumentation du gouvernement qui a été mise en place. Et puis là, vous êtes fiers d'annoncer que finalement, il y en a moins de demandes qui arrivent de ce pays-là. C'est sûr, ces gens-là ne peuvent plus se rendre ici. Puis un peu, si comme vous nous disiez, depuis qu'on a aboli le mariage, il y a moins de divorces. Ben oui, mais c'est pas ça le point. Ce qui préoccupe, parce qu'évidemment, ce n'est pas tous les pays qui n'avaient pas besoin de visa. Ce qui préoccupe beaucoup les gens au Québec, c'était la question, par exemple, de l'industrie touristique. Beaucoup de visiteurs mexicains choisissaient Montréal, c'est une belle ville, et Québec aussi, aux accents européens. Et en plus, comparativement aux États-Unis, qui est pourtant plus proche du Mexique, ils n'avaient pas besoin de visa. Alors, vous avez pris une décision qui a un effet collatéral, bien sûr, sur les demandes de réfugiés, puisque les gens ne peuvent tout simplement plus en faire, mais avez-vous fait une analyse de l'impact que cela aurait sur l'industrie touristique?
Oui, Monsieur le Président. La réalité est que nous continuons à avoir les milliers des voyageurs de le Mexique. C'est presque le même niveau que l'année dernière. On n'a pas vu une diminution importante des visiteurs de le Mexique. Mais, Monsieur le Président, il y a des coûts pour les commettants, les électeurs de M. Saint-Cyr dans son comté. Vous savez que c'était le gouvernement du Québec qui m'a exigé de faire quelque chose pour contrôler la situation de faux demandeurs d'asile qui sont arrivés au Québec. Est-ce que vous, Monsieur le Président, la grande majorité de demandeurs d'asile de le Mexique au Canada se sont établis au Québec et nous estimons que le coût de chaque cas aux contribuables est presque 30 000 $. C'est 29 000 $ pour chaque cas. Ça veut dire que la diminution des nombres des faux demandes d'asile de le Mexique depuis l'imposition de visa est à peu près 37 millions de dollars, majoritairement les coûts aux contribuables québécois. Ça veut dire ça, c'est l'argent pour les faux demandeurs. Mais on ne pouvait pas dépenser sur les besoins sociaux des Québécois et des Canadiens. Monsieur le Président, tous les gouvernements ont une obligation d'agir d'une façon responsable auprès de nos contribuables. Et je suis heureux qu'on ait sauvé les contribuables du Québec, les presque 40 millions de dollars.
Chow, you're now on the air.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're a good chair. Fair. Instead of going after those that are exploited, will you go after the criminals first, i.e. bring forward the changes on the way the middle people, the consultants that are unscrupulous? Would you do that first and remove those people from the system before you change the refugees IRB setup? Because if you don't do that, you are still going to have, you can have a new system, but I'll guarantee you that those folks that are out there preying on the most vulnerable will continue to find loopholes, and they will again counsel people to put in bogus claims, etc. So what is the priority? Is it the priority go after those that know the law and deliberately exploit it, or just to teach people to lie, or those that really don't know the laws and they are just told that if they do this, they could, get into Canada and exploit and be able to. In many cases, those people end up working in very low wages, and their status is in limbo. And they are not necessarily having, quote, a good time because they are paying back the funds that they have owned those middle people. Because, at the end of the day, who actually gain from it? Not necessarily those that you're talking about that are here trying, jump the queue, whatever you talk about. Those that is the middle people that end up making $5,000, $10,000 per refugees claims.
Well, I don't disagree, Mr. Chairman, and I don't think it's a dichotomy. I don't think it's either refugee reform or improved regulation of ghost consultants and intermediaries. I think we need to do both, and I'm committed to doing both. I think that Ms. Chow is right. There is a connection. I wouldn't overstate the connection. I don't think, we don't have reliable statistics on this, but from everything I've seen and read, a lot of asylum claims are made on the basis of bad advice, and sometimes commercial advice, but not all of them. So I mean, we need to fix both. And I think when we come forward with a package of refugee reforms, everyone will see that it's going to take a certain period of time to actually implement a new system. I hope that we can move a little more quickly on the issue of stricter regulation of consultants. But let's be clear about the issue on ghost consultants. It doesn't matter how serious the penalties are. It doesn't matter how vigorous our monitoring and enforcement resources are. At the end of the day, there's money to be made, and there will always be, I regret,
but they should be at least regulated. Right now, there's no regulation. Anyone could set up shop.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying we can't eliminate it. We can reduce it, but we can't eliminate it.
Another area, back to the visitor visas, whether it's from Mexico or Cuba, we are still seeing, like in Havana, look at Cuba, 69%, which approval rate, which means that 1 out of 3 are being turned down. And I come back to that whole notion that because it is so opaque, people have no idea, and each time they put in $75, no refund. So as a result, people are wondering, is it the dollar amount they make back home, or is it a good job? I've seen people that have good jobs, I've seen people that have families, and I have seen people that have real estate, they own several companies, and yet still being turned down as a visitor visa. So as you put visas requirements on Mexico, for example, you have to have a very clear and transparent process. If not, we are just, people are just saying, is this trying to make us make money? Because every time we applied, we end up paying $75. Whereas in England, and which is why they're getting a lot of the visitors, England and Australia, they are, their appeal is for free. So why wouldn't you put in an appeal process so at least you can, the decisions made on law and fact and not seemingly subjective decisions?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we have an enormous number of people who want to come to Canada, millions and millions and millions of people who would like to visit here. In some of those cases, our visa officers decide that there's not sufficient evidence that the person is likely to return, and so they make a negative decision. I am concerned that, I should point out that there is access to an appeal process, that the people who are rejected can make an application for redress
to federal court.
For federal court.
Yeah, but you can't, that takes, what, a year? You just talked about how long it takes, and it's very costly.
But it's in part because of the potential for judicial review that I think our visa officers are very conscientious. We have a global visa acceptance rate of 80%. It's true that it's lower in some countries by definition. And
but why?
Well, in some countries you'll have a higher number of applicants who have little or no economic connection. Claudette, you deal with this every day. Would you like to?
Yeah, basically the issue is that the visa officer has to look at the intent behind it. So of course, when you're looking at intent,
how do you judge intent?
It's very difficult, and that's why we might not agree on the decision. But certainly in some countries, the push factors to try to leave that country and come into Canada and stay illegally is big. In some countries, the economic...
Do you have a standard?
Okay, Ms. Chow, we've got to end this somehow.
Darn.
I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to Mr. Dijkstra. Thank you.
Very good. I don't know, this is becoming habitual. Olivia asks more questions than the time allows for answers.
Mr.
Anyway.
Dykstra, everybody's been over today by a long shot, so.
I know. Well, it's, Mr. Chair, it's because we're all so eager to get back here and start working, but we have to allow the people that we have here to witness, if it's the minister, if it's staff from the ministry, or if it's anyone else, we have to give those folks the opportunity to respond. That's why we're asking them to get here. We can debate this issue amongst ourselves at pretty much any time. That was my point. One of the issues that I see certainly, and it was brought up by Mr. Young about the issues in his riding with respect to Pakistan, and I, from the Niagara community, certainly have had a number of requests regarding the plights of individuals, Iraqi Christians, for example, and one of the decisions and reasons that we have moved in the direction we have with respect to visas for Mexico and the Czech Republic has to do with the fact that we have legitimate and those who are in countries right now demanding, hoping, have their expectations risen with respect to seeking asylum here in Canada. And one of the connections that hasn't been made yet today, and I'm wondering if you could comment on this, Minister, is the fact that we have those in other countries who simply are, in fact, in terrible plight and do seek asylum here in Canada. And we have tried to work through this process with Mexico and the Czech Republic. I'm wondering if you can comment and connect those two things together.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that follows through from Mr. Saint-Cyr's questions, because, you know, we want to be a country that is open to providing protection to victims of persecution and violence. That is our best tradition. It's in our national character, and we do just that. We do it better virtually than any other country that I'm aware of in the world. I make no apologies for this country's approach to refugees, to victims of persecution. This year, we will land in Canada as permanent residents more than 10,000 people who have been determined by the United Nations to be refugees, the majority of whom are government-assisted refugees, who we will help to establish in Canada, and about a quarter of whom are privately sponsored refugees, who, like the Vietnamese boat people 30 years ago, will be settled with the assistance of local communities such as parishes and community organizations. This is a tremendous thing, Mr. Chairman. I mean, there are countries substantially larger than Canada that receive substantially fewer resettled refugees. And having said that, we in Canada, with a population of 33 million, are not in a position to welcome all of the world's refugees, and certainly not all at once. There are over 10 million refugees in UN camps abroad, and there are tens of millions of people who could probably make legitimate asylum claims in a system like Canada's. We cannot practically take that entire global burden on our shoulders. We do far more than our share. According to Abraham, the representative of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees here in Canada, our government is contributing more to global refugee relief than any government in the history of Canada. We have increased effectively our operational target for resettlement of refugees to Canada this year, in part, as Mr. Dykstra has indicated, through our program for refugees in the Middle East, most of whom will be Iraqi, many of whom are persecuted because of their religion. In fact, for this and each of the 2 subsequent years, we will be receiving 3,900 refugees from that region, mostly from Iraq. That's more than any other country in the world except the United States, and it's far more in absolute terms than any other country. We are receiving, over the course of a number of years, 5,000 refugees who've been living in camps on the border with Thailand and Burma. From the Burmese Karen population. We're receiving 5,000 Bhutanese Hindus who have been sitting in refugee camps in Nepal. We're receiving thousands of Rohingya Muslims who've been sitting in UN refugee camps in Bangladesh. Mr. Chairman, we are doing what we can, but if we really want to take the approach that Mr. Saint-Cyr wants and just open the doors to a flood of asylum claimants, someone has to pay for that. There is finite capacity for us to accept a certain number of people in a year. Yes, we have the highest relative level of immigration of permanent residents in the developed world at 0.8% of population, but we cannot increase that by orders of magnitude and resettle people here successfully. There are limits to how many people we can house. You know, take the example of the Roma claimants in the Toronto area. According to reports that I received, public housing facilities were overflowing in the spring and summer of this year, when we were seeing as much as half of the passengers on direct flights from Prague making asylum claims. There are practical limits to our generosity, and I'm simply saying we need to be soft-hearted but hard-headed about the balance between our generosity and the practical limits of the number of people we can accept. We have no apologies to make in this regard. And let me say that in any refugee reform package that I bring forward to Parliament, I would like to see an increase in the number of people that we resettle to this country who are defined by the UN to be refugees. But I think we can only responsibly make that undertaking if we can reduce the incentive for abuse for people to come and who cost our taxpayers at least $29,000 per case. This is not free. The kind of abuse that Mr. said that we were seeing from particular source countries earlier this year costs our taxpayers. Those are dollars that could be going to help real victims of real persecution around the world. And I think we need to get our priorities right. Being in government, being in public service is about making choices. And I choose to prioritize real victims of persecution over immigrants coming through the back door of our asylum system.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Ms. Mendez.
Very much, Mr. Chair. Monsieur le ministre, dans la suite de ce que vous venez de partager avec nous par rapport aux priorités du Canada, j'aimerais savoir si dans vos priorités ou dans vos plans dans l'immédiat, il y a l'hypothèse d'ouvrir la possibilité d'accorder des permis des visas de résidence temporaire à entrée multiple. Nous avons des problèmes majeurs avec les familles de nos citoyens qui habitent à l'étranger, qui viennent ici régulièrement. Je trouve que ça serait une façon peut-être plus efficace aussi de gérer le système si on accordait des permis de visiteurs pour 5 ans ou pour 10 ans, où les personnes peuvent rentrer plusieurs fois. Les États-Unis le font de façon relativement réussie. Je pense qu'on pourrait peut-être les imiter dans ce sens-là, et ça serait quelque chose qui aiderait énormément les familles des citoyens canadiens d'origine étrangère.
Monsieur le Président, nous encourageons l'émis des visas pour l'entrée multiple et 46% des visas que nous avons émis aux citoyens mexicains depuis l'imposition des visas sont de sorte multiple entry visas, au lieu de 54% qui ont été pour une seule entrée. Combien?
Pour 5 ans, pour 10 ans, pour...
Malheureusement, les lois canadiennes nous permettent seulement de l'émettre pour la validité du passeport. Alors, si quelqu'un a un passeport seulement pour 1 an, ça va être une entrée multiple pour 1 an. Si la personne a un passeport valide pour 3 ans, ça serait pour 3 ans. On va utiliser l'exemple de Mexique pour essayer d'encourager encore plus nos agents. Vous savez que le plus gros problème pour nous, c'est qu'il y a un coût différentiel entre les deux, une entrée simple, une entrée multiple. Il faut aussi faire du travail avec nos requérants pour qu'ils soient prêts à demander une entrée multiple, parce que plusieurs ne veulent pas le faire.
Mais je pense que c'est très mal connu, parce qu'effectivement, ce n'est pas demandé du tout. Peut-être qu'il y a quelque chose à faire au niveau de la promotion des visas. Je vais partager mon temps avec M. Jeffness.
Merci. This past spring, I put a question to you, Minister, in the House about the 1/3 cut to staffing levels at the immigration section in the Kyiv Embassy, to which you and, in fact, your parliamentary secretary in evening debates claimed that there was not a 1/3 cut to staffing levels. I just wanted to read into the record what Ms. Sarkova, who is the Canadian Embassy Program Officer, stated in an interview in October 26th of 2006, the year in question, to the Kyiv Post. In the immigration section of the Canadian Embassy in Kyiv, this review and adjustment resulted in the elimination of 1 immigration officer and 2 clerical support positions, a registry supervisor and a cashier. When I inquired of your department, sir, I received a similar response that, in fact, there was a 1/3 cut. So my question then is, Minister, in fact, you put out a press release into the Ukrainian-Canadian community stating that there were no cuts, that this was false. Were you misinformed by your department, or were you engaged in disinformation?
Neither. Mr. Chairman, when I said that there have been no cuts, I'm referring to the total number of staff in our immigration mission have remained constant. There was 1 Canadian-based officer removed. There were additional locally engaged staff added. There are 12 staff working in Kiev. But, Mr. Chairman, the important thing is that our immigration office continues to perform very strongly in Kiev. I visited it in November. In point of fact, it was before Islamabad, so that was the first place I went as minister. And I'm happy to advise Mr. Wisniewski that in, for instance, 2007, we processed 1,700 permanent residency applications from Kiev. Last year, 1,500. This is in comparison to, for instance, 1,400 and 1,300 in 2004 and 5. So there's been an increase under this government of the number of people processed in Kiev. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I don't make operational decisions. I don't tell ADM Deschênes, we need to put 1 person here, take 1 person. They have to look at the global service requirements, and they shift personnel. And by the way, visa officers are very costly to the system. The Department of Foreign Affairs assesses us a charge that they estimate for, can I allowed to talk about this? Of about $850,000, I understand, for every visa officer we place abroad. So our operational people have to make some tough decisions, and sometimes it means hiring more local staff rather than Canadian-based officers. The important thing is we're doing the same amount of business.
Sorry, time has expired.
Monsieur le ministre, l'avantage d'être celui qui répond aux questions, c'est qu'on a toujours le dernier mot, en quelque sorte. Je me permettrai quand même de remettre les pendules à l'heure, et vous le savez très bien, puisqu'on a l'occasion de discuter ensemble de temps à autre. Je n'ai jamais prétendu qu'il fallait ouvrir nos frontières à tous les demandeurs de réfugiés du monde. Je ne faisais que souligner que, contrairement à ce que vous avez dit sur toutes les tribunes cet été, la mesure des visas ne s'attaque pas spécifiquement aux demandes frauduleuses ou aux demandes illégitimes, elle s'attaque à tous les demandes. C'est juste ça mon point, et vous savez très bien, c'est la même chose pour tous les demandes de visa à travers le monde. Mais je vais prendre les quelques minutes qui me restent pour vous poser une question sur la question des immigrants investisseurs. Vous savez que le Québec discute beaucoup, a une certaine autonomie toute relative en matière de politique de sélection des immigrants, et le gouvernement du Québec s'est donné comme objectif de doubler le nombre d'immigrants investisseurs dans son programme d'ici les 2 prochaines années. Or, comme vous le savez, on fait encore partie du Canada. Et il faut qu'après avoir pris une décision au Québec, après avoir mis un objectif, il faut se retourner vers le gouvernement fédéral, puis aller quêter les mesures pour qu'on puisse mettre en œuvre nos volontés. Alors moi, ce que je veux savoir, bientôt, vous allez publier les chiffres au niveau des objectifs canadiens. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner la garantie que les décisions, les politiques élaborées par le gouvernement du Québec, est-ce que le gouvernement du Québec va avoir les moyens de ses ambitions ou il va être freiné par le gouvernement fédéral?
Monsieur le Président, le programme des investisseurs immigrants est très important à l'échelle fédérale et également au Québec. Nous travaillons avec les provinces pour faire davantage là-dessus, mais il y a des limites parce que, comme j'ai dit il y a quelques moments, même avec une cible de l'immigration globale très ambitieuse, on est limité du nombre de gens qu'on peut accueillir au Canada. Ça veut dire, à moyen, c'est un quart d'un million. Et si nous élargissons les cibles pour un programme particulier comme les immigrants investisseurs, il faut diminuer les cibles pour les immigrants dans un autre domaine. Et ça, c'est le problème. Je vais passer à Mme Deschênes pour faire davantage de commentaires.
Du côté opérationnel, on essaie autant possible de travailler avec la province pour assurer que leurs cibles soient rencontrées. Je noterai du côté investisseur qu'on doit faire 3 fois le travail parce que pas tout le monde qui est accepté par le Québec comme investisseur va s'établir au Québec. Alors, on travaille avec eux. C'est une priorité pour nous. On va faire le mieux qu'on peut.
OK, mais vous savez, je comprends le point de vue opérationnel, mais il y a une question politique derrière ça, c'est que le gouvernement fédéral est toujours très fier de dire au Québec, aux Québécois, vous avez le contrôle sur la sélection de vos immigrants. C'est une portion assez limitée, finalement, beaucoup plus qu'on aimerait le faire croire. C'est simplement les immigrants économiques qui sont... seulement les immigrants qui sont sélectionnés. Mais bon, même, mon point, c'est que même à l'intérieur de cette partie-là qui est sélectionnée par le Québec, il y a des contraintes qui arrivent après pour le gouvernement fédéral. Le gouvernement québécois a décidé dans sa politique, à lui, d'accueillir 2 fois plus d'immigrants investisseurs. Est-ce que le gouvernement, le ministre, peut nous donner l'assurance qu'il n'y aura pas de contraintes au niveau des décisions du gouvernement fédéral qui va empêcher le gouvernement du Québec d'atteindre ses propres objectifs?
Je ne peux pas faire n'importe quelle garantie. Je peux donner une garantie qu'on va travailler de près avec le gouvernement du Québec pour réussir avec nos cibles et leurs cibles ensemble. Mais le gouvernement du Québec comprend très bien que nous faisons, nous traitons leurs dossiers avec une priorité. Ce n'est pas tellement populaire avec les autres provinces. Mais nous le faisons et on va continuer à aider le Québec d'attirer davantage des investisseurs immigrants dans le cadre de nos limites globales. Et donc,
donc, globalement, un peu comme M. Blackburn disait sur un autre sujet, il faut être conscient qu'on a, comme Québécois, une limite dans notre pouvoir de décision qui, en fin de compte, il va toujours avoir...
Monsieur le Président, je dois dire que le Québec a un très bon marché avec le fédéral en ce qui concerne l'entente Canada-Québec sur l'immigration. Ça marche très bien pour le Québec et on est heureux d'honorer l'esprit de cette entente-là.
Very much, Mr. Minister, and your colleagues for coming and spending some time with us today. We've appreciated your information, and the meeting is now adjourned.